If there's any demographic within church that is more restless than the rest, it's men. In fact, so restless are the men that they aren't even there. Statistics show that in every type of church in the West, women make up 60 to 70% of the congregation, with only 30 to 40% being made up of men. Women are more engaged too, and they volunteer for more of the programs. Most young men will leave church before they turn 20, and although some will return in their 30s with wife and kid in tow, many won't return at all. And this means that in some churches, single women now outnumber guys by around 2 to 1. You only need to look around to see the evidence of this. Now, why is the church hemorrhaging men? David Murrow has spent a lot of time examining this issue and says, there are only two possible explanations for the lack of men in church. Either A, men are more sinful than women, or B, there's something about the church that's driving men away. The more I study men and church, the more I'm convinced that B is the more likely cause. In short, he agrees with what many other commentators have been saying for a long time. The church has been feminized. The church is now an environment that many men don't fit into and don't want to be a part of. To prove the point, Murrow conducted an exercise where he showed two lists to hundreds of people, Christian and non-Christian. He asked them to identify the list that they thought best characterized Jesus and his true followers. This is that list. More than 95% of the time, Murrow says that people chose the right set as the best representation of true Christian values. Now, the shocker is that Murrow created the two lists using words taken from John Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. The left set are the traditional values of men, and the right set are the traditional values of women. Murrow's point is that when people think of Christ and his followers, they automatically think of feminine values. When men pick up on this, even subconsciously, the reaction to attending church is similar to the reaction they might have if asked to attend a bridal shower or a bachelorette party. They want nothing to do with it. In general, men are looking for an environment where they can express their masculinity. That's why they go to the outdoors, to physical sporting events, and to hardware stores. Men want to be men, but they don't feel like they can be at church. They feel like there's no place for them there. Now, why is this at all important? Why do we need men in church? Well, it's not just that masses of Christian girls are growing up without suitable partners, as problematic as that is. The church is suffering in many other ways from the absence of men. To understand how, we need to explore exactly what masculinity is. Only then will we understand what we're missing. Defining masculinity, or femininity for that matter, is a risky business. As soon as I start to do this, I will inevitably cause offense to someone somewhere who believes that their masculinity or femininity is being undermined by generalized stereotypes to which they don't fully conform. In other words, you may find yourself starting sentences over the next few parts with, "But I'm a man and I don't," or "But I'm a woman and I like that too. Does that make me any less of a man or woman?" In other words, like all generalizations, there will be exceptions to the rules. Nevertheless, it would be foolish to perpetuate the secular idea that there is no basic difference between the sexes. It's important to realize that men and women are indeed very different. We're designed by God to be different, that the differences are good, and that they complement one another. While each man or woman won't fit all the generalizations exactly, and while that doesn't make them any less of a man or woman, there are indeed inherent traits and natural tendencies within the sexes that we would be foolish to ignore. When I was a kid, I used to play tennis with my older sister, but with a twist that always used to frustrate me. She would never play competitively, ever. She just wasn't interested in keeping score. She only ever wanted to play rallies. Now, I didn't get this. What was the point in knocking the ball back and forth across the net for hours if there was no winning and losing? I couldn't see the appeal in this. She only ever wanted to play a kind of cooperative game where we worked together to see how long we could keep the ball going back and forth without it going out of play. Me, on the other hand, I wanted it to go out of play, preferably after an overhead smash or a drilled forehand down the line. That's what gave me a thrill. I preferred playing tennis with my best friend Brendan. He was a guy, and with guys it was at least competitive. In fact, at times it got so competitive that we would get into some pretty big arguments. If I hit a winner close to the line and Brendan called it out, as he had a habit of doing, the game would instantly have to come to a stop until we debated the call, sometimes for 10 to 15 minutes or more. In fact, I'm pretty sure that one time I felt so cheated, I walked off the court and refused to play on. You'll see this dynamic in pretty much any playground or field where boys are playing together. The games boys play are generally competitive, and before any action takes place, they will come together to meticulously lay down the rules and map out the boundaries. Rules are very important to boys. They simply cannot be violated. If one boy feels like the rules of the game have been violated, the whole thing will have to come to a stop until the call has been argued out. Obeying the rules is so important to boys that if one feels a strong sense of injustice, he may even pick up the ball, leave his friends, and go home. In other words, boys will sacrifice relationships on the altar of rules. Rules are the most important thing. Girls playing together are generally far less interested in rules and are far more interested in cooperation and building relationships. Like my sister who, even though we were on opposite sides of the tennis net, wanted to play a cooperative game with no winners or losers. Girls like to jump rope where two hold either end and another goes in the middle to see how long they can skip for without getting tangled up. They'll play relational fantasy games where one pretends to be the mummy and another pretends to be the daddy. Often they'll just sit about and chat about something. There are very rarely winners and losers in girls' games. They're simply about building relationships and cooperation. In fact, when they find themselves amongst competitive boys who are arguing about the rules, you'll very often hear them in the middle of all the drama protesting. What does it matter? It's only a game. They just want everyone to get along and play nicely. But this is a mindset that boys generally can't comprehend. There is very rarely such a thing as just a game. Therefore, contrary to boys, girls will sacrifice rules on the altar of relationships. Relationships are the most important thing. As boys and girls grow up into men and women, the basic traits remain. When a man is grappling with a dilemma, his first question is, what do the rules say? When a woman is grappling with a dilemma, the first question that she asks is, how will this decision affect my relationships? Men continue to be more concerned with right and wrong, while girls continue to be more concerned with unity. For example, even in adulthood, men will continue to argue about sporting decisions, sometimes for years or even decades after they were made. Fair play and justice is paramount. Where did the ball land? Was his foot over the line? Did the referee get the call right? English and German football fans to this day will debate whether the ball was over the line in the 1966 World Cup final. Men actually don't care if someone wins or loses by a decision, as long as everything was done according to the rules, fair play was observed, and justice was served. Women, on the other hand, continue to be obsessed with relationships into adulthood. Their favourite books, movies, magazines usually revolve around relationships of one kind or another. Women also continue to be more likely to plan social events and to keep up with extended family and old friends. While we're on the subject, here's a little sidetrack. You may remember in Know Your Enemy I pointed out that truth must come before unity. Well, because men are naturally more concerned with truth, i.e. the rules, and women are generally more concerned with unity, i.e. relationships, this is one of the reasons that God has designated men to lead, because truth must come before unity. When women lead and unity starts to take precedence, there can often be a slide into compromise and liberalism. An example of unity before truth is, God is love. These two men love each other. Why should we not bless their relationship? Jesus never excluded anyone and stood with the downtrodden and oppressed. In other words, what does right and wrong matter as long as these people want to be together? Isn't unity, peace and love the most important thing? Can't we just all get along? Jesus did indeed stand with the downtrodden and oppressed, but always within the boundaries set by the moral law, and he was unwavering in his demands for purity and righteousness. Truth must come first, and then we need to unite behind that truth. The natural tendency for men to put truth ahead of unity makes them more suitable for leadership. Now, you could argue, if excessive female-led focus on unity leads to liberalism, then doesn't excessive male-led focus on rules lead to legalism? That would be correct, which is why, to avoid both pits, we need both men and women working together, and both are equally important. But since truth must come before unity, the masculine must lead out. And if that means picking up our ball and walking away from sections of the church that are getting into heresy, then so be it.